Hey there folks, and welcome to week one of our video series. In this week, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a rhythmic warm-up. We're going to be using the half steps and the whole steps that we learned about in our first prerequisite to construct the major scale. We're going to play our first two major scales, and in fact, the major scales portion of these videos, we're going to be doing two major scales per week. And we're also going to introduce you to the thing that we organize our major scales on, a very important shape called the circle of fifths. All right, so now let's head on over to the drum and put our hands on these syncopated rhythms with the metronome. Okay, so here we are on our week one rhythmic warm-up. A few things to remember before we get started. First of all, remember that we are going to be mirror images of each other. So I'll be using my right hand, but that means that you will be using your right hand. I'll be using my left hand, and you need to use your left hand, right? It's going to be kind of be crossed like that, but just make sure you're using your right hand when you should be using your right hand, and your left hand when you need to be using your left hand. Now, I am using drumsticks, and you don't have to use drumsticks, okay? You can tap this on your lap, you can tap it on your desk, you can tap it on the lid of your piano. All that matters is that we are actually going back and forth between our right and our left hand, okay? Now here's the thing, I will be speeding up as we go from line to line, but if you need, especially in the first few weeks, getting used to this, getting used to how to get on the bike, if you will, you can practice these on your own with the metronome as slow as you need. You don't have to speed up if you're not comfortable doing that, all right? And remember, if you pay for the subscriber content, you can download all of these worksheets that you see on this video. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to read each of these lines 3 times. The first time we're going to read the right hand with that rhythm on the top and the quarter notes on the bottom with our left hand. Then we're going to switch it and we'll read the quarter notes on the bottom with our right hand and the rhythm on the top with our left hand. And then the third time that we read it, we're going to read the rhythm line together on the top line with both of our hands, and we'll ignore that quarter note line on the bottom, all right? We'll start our metronome at 40 BPM, and we are going to imagine that these clicks are going to represent our downbeats, okay? So here we go, I'll get it started, and I'm going to count us off on this first line. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and now we're going to switch our hands. Here we go. 1, and 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and top line hands together. 1, and 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. There we go. Nice work. Now moving on to the second line, this is going to actually be our very first real syncopated line. Although there were some rests, some downbeat rests or quarter note rests in the last measure, this is going to have some more interesting spaces and gaps created by those offset quarter notes and ties and eighth note rests and things like that. So I'm actually not going to speed the metronome up for this first one, and we're going to continue to hear the metronome on the downbeats since this is our first syncopated rhythm together. So the metronome will remain on 40 BPM, and it will represent our downbeats. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4, 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and now we're going to switch our hands. 1, and 2, and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and hands together. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4. Excellent. There we go. So that's syncopation for you. Let's go ahead and speed the metronome up for line 3. We're going to put it onto 45 BPM. And now let's try what we did in the prerequisite video, where we're going to hear the clicks. We're going to imagine it in our mind. We're not changing anything with the metronome. We're going to pretend that instead of these being the downbeats, they're going to represent the upbeats. All right? So it'll go something like this. 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2. Now we're going to switch our hands. 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2, hands together. Here we go. 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2, 3, 4 and. There we have it, just like that. If you need to go back over any of these, feel free, but we're going to continue to move ahead, and with our fourth and final bar or line of our week 1 rhythmic warm-up. Here we go. I'm going to speed the metronome up one more time, 5 more beats to 50 BPM, and again we're going to practice hearing this on the upbeat. All right? 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4, 1, 2, 3 and change hands. 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4, 1, 2. Now we're going to read the top line hands together. 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Excellent. All right, we did it. Our first rhythmic warm-up. If you found this difficult, that's totally fine. It's like riding a bike. It takes a few times to figure out how to get up on that, especially when you are playing with the metronome on the upbeat. But I promise you that the more you try, the easier it will get. I have yet to have a student who wasn't able to learn it, whether they were 6 years old or all the way up to 75 years old. So hang in there, get some practice in, and now we're going to get back over to the piano. Okay, now that we're all warmed up, let's talk about scales, all right? So in our first prerequisite video, we were talking about the concept of whole steps and half steps, right? So if we look over at our piano, we can see some whole steps and half steps. I'll first play the chromatic scale in the half step motion. There we go. Now remember to use the right fingers. We would only want to use our third finger and our thumb and our second finger in those spaces. We want to go slow and careful because we're focused on control, not speed. And those are half steps. right? And if we look at the whole steps, we could have or the other one coming back down. Oh, sorry. Right, there we go. Half steps and whole steps. You don't have to be a champion at those, but we do want to be familiar with them because we are now going to use those to build our major scale, right? Now, as you may have seen these terms before, but I like to use what's called solfege to talk about scales, and that's borrowed from the world of choir, and they are Italian words. We have do, re, mi, fa, so, la, ti, do. And in between each one of those, we have an interval, okay? The W is going to stand for whole step. The H is going to stand for half step. Now here's something, it took me, I don't know why, but I was using this system for years before it ever hit me that, hey, you know what? These syllables that you say in solfege actually do have a meaning. They're not just random Italian things that are meant to sound pretty. But think about this. We have two half steps in our major scale. One is here and one is here. And notice how they are both preceded by the only syllables that use the long I vowel, the mi and the t, right? So there is meaning to this. If you can remember do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, then this major scale formula of whole steps and half steps will fall right into place because the half step always comes right after the long I vowel, the E, the mi, or the T, right? And so let's try this out. Starting from our good friend, we were talking about C, so we're going to start from a C. I'm going to go back to the piano view over here, and let's give this a try, okay? So if we were to call C do, then we would need to take a whole step to get to the re. And if we were to go from the re to the mi, we would need to take another whole step. Now here's the thing. We're on the mi, right? So then we know that we need to take a half step right there. Now we're on the fa, so we're going to go up to so by taking a whole step. We're going to go from so to la by taking another whole step. From la to ti by taking one more whole step. And now we're on the T. We hear that long I vowel, so we know that we're going to take a half step. There we go. And you can hear the sound of the major scale. Now, don't worry too much about your actual fingers yet. We're going to go over that in just a second. But that's a scale that's pretty easy. Anyone could accidentally play that major scale. So let's challenge ourselves really quickly and let's try to use that formula starting on a more foreign key, okay? Because any note can be do. And so let's go ahead and try this middle black key right here, the G sharp, all right? Now, what's going to happen is if we call this do, then to get to re, we're going to need to move up a whole step, all right? To get to mi, we're going to need to take another whole step. Right? And remember, this is a whole step right here because we have to skip that one white key there in the middle. So we had do, re, mi. Now to get up, we're on the mi. So to get to the fa, we need to take a half step. Now we're on fa. To get to so, we take another whole step. Now that we're on so, to get to la, we're going to take another whole step. La to ti is another whole step. And finally, to return back to do, we're on ti, and we're going to go up a half step to there. And you can hear it. Let your ears be the judge. Now, right, like I said, you don't have to worry about your fingers, so you could even just play with a single finger right now, because we are going to be talking about how to play the right fingers in just a moment, all right? So, speaking of the correct fingers, let's take a closer look at the fingers for C major, all right? Now, the cool thing is that actually for the first 5 scales that we're going to play, we're going to be using the same finger pattern. So this, you know, it's going to take you it's going to give you a moment to get used to this and get acclimated to playing scales for the first time. But as you can see down here, we have our row for our right hand, and we also have our row for our left hand. And I've also gone ahead and added the solfege layer up here. Now notice that I have added some different colors on there, which was also in our major scale formula, and that is because we have the do, the mi, and the so, okay? Now those are 3 very important notes because they create sort of what I call the skeleton of the scale, which is also known as the chord, right? The major chord. So we have scales, we have chords, and the chords are within the scales. And as you can see, they kind of make this skeletal structure. They're always going to be made out of do, mi, and so. So when we play this scale, at the very end, I'd like to hear you play the chord at the end of the scale. Now, don't worry too much about your chords other than that right now, because as soon as we finish our scales, we're going to do a very thorough look at all of our chords, all right? So let's go ahead and take a look at this finger pattern for C. Now notice that there are a couple areas where I write lift, right? And that's because just like we talked about earlier, when you play this, sometimes people, you see we start with our first three fingers and we go 1, 2, 3, and then you have to put your thumb down onto that F. A lot of people instinctively want to play 1, 2, 3, and then they want to get their left thumb under there, or I'm sorry, they want to get their thumb under there, and what that does is notice how my elbow is coming up, my wrist is twisting, and suddenly we have this twisting motion like that. So we want to resist doing that. We don't want to twist, we don't want to see our elbows coming up like that. So that's why I wrote the word lift in there, because what we want to do is we want to play 1, 2, 3. We want to lift the entire arm apparatus, move it over, set our thumb down on the F, and continue playing. Now at first, this could create a gap that you might hear, and that's okay. As you practice this and get more used to it, you'll notice that you can move your hand 1, 2, 3 faster, and that gap will go away. I would rather you start with a gap in your sound than to start developing this bad habit of twisting your wrist, because it's much harder to break a bad habit than it is to slowly build a good habit, right? So let's go back over to the piano view now, and we're going to try this out, okay? So we're going to be playing the C major scale with our right hand first. So what we're going to do is we're going to play our first 3 notes. We're going to go 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to lift our arm, and we're going to put it back down, and we're going to put our thumb on the F, and we're simply going to use the rest of our fingers, just like that. And then remember, we need to play it ascending and descending because music moves in both directions. So we would go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, lift, put our middle finger back on the E, and put it back on the C. And you see I left a gap in there, but now I'll play it smoothly. You see, there was no twisting there. I lifted and I quickly was able to relocate my hand. Now the same thing for the left hand, except it's a little bit backwards. We're going to use all 5 of our fingers first, and then we're going to lift and use the 3 fingers. So the C major scale would look something like this. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, lift, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See that one more time, nice and smoothly. 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Now the last thing is don't forget to play your chord at the end. So for instance, the right hand. Chord. You want to arpeggiate it and play it together. Left hand. Chord. Okay? So we want to try that. You can go as slow as you want. Remember, we want to develop slow control. And if you do develop that, then you will actually be moving in the direction of speed a lot faster than if you try right now to just jump in and play it as fast as you can. You won't develop control, and it will cause you to start and stop a lot more. So treat it more like yoga. Now the last step in this, if you want to take it to the next level, which I would definitely recommend, is playing it hands together. And in that case, it can be a little bit tricky, but I like to think about it. I'm going to switch back to the actual scales view. Here we go. So we're going to kind of put our brain in our right hand first, because we know that the lift is going to occur in the right hand first, whereas the left hand can be on autopilot at first, because we know we're just going to use all 5 of our fingers. So you can kind of think about, which hand do I need to think about first, and set the other hand on autopilot. Once you make that lift right here and you get your right hand resituated on the F, then you can switch your brain back over in time to get the lift for your left hand. All right, that's going to look something like this. Okay, so there's our C major scale. Now we're going to be moving on, and as you can see on our guide here, we're going to be moving to the G major scale. But how exactly did we get there? Well, we're going to take a short detour today into our circle of fifths. Now I know if it feels like there's a lot of information, we're still on that takeoff trajectory. We will reach our cruising altitude, where eventually this will all be very routine. We'll be talking about the same stuff over and over. So bear with me right now, but we're going to talk about a very important shape called the circle of fifths, and it is how we order our scales, and it is even the beginnings of the rules of harmony that we're going to discover together, okay? So this is our circle of fifths. Notice how it's blank right now, because I believe that everybody should have to fill it out themselves. It's very easy to just download a circle of fifths that's already been filled out, but that doesn't teach us anything. So we want to create this ourselves. And what we're going to do first is we're just going to focus on this do to so relationship. Forget about the fault and the law that are on there for right now. We want to focus on do to so. This is possibly the most important relationship in all of music, the do to the so. So much so that, remember, we were talking about do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do having meanings, where that mi and that ti meant that we were going to take a half step. Well, think about it. Do is obviously the most important note in the scale because it names the scale. But what is the other syllable that rhymes with do? So. It's the only one. So because do rhymes with so, we know that they go together, and therefore they form a very, very important relationship. Now, if we take a look back at our C major scale, we can notice that if we look over here on our so, we have a G there, right? And so therefore, G will become our next do. And if we were to fill that out on our circle, it would look something like this. I'll make my font just a little bit bigger. There we go. So up here, we have our C. Now, we mentioned this in the first prerequisite video that a lot of music starts on C. And the reason why is because the C major scale, as we just saw, has no black notes, okay? But as we go clockwise on our circle, we're going to be adding one black note every time until finally we get down to 6 o'clock, where we'll have as many black notes as we're going to get. And then as we proceed from 6 o'clock back to 12 o'clock at the top of the circle, we'll be taking black notes away. So that is why the circle is a very great way to organize the scales, because now they are going to be moving in the order of what we call their key signature, the number of black keys or accidentals that they have, right? So G is going to add one sharp, all right? We're going to start by adding sharps, and that sharp is F sharp, okay? Now, in our next video, we will talk about the order of the sharps, okay? It's very simple, it's not that difficult, but for right now, let's just know that the first sharp that we add in the scale after C, which is G, is F sharp. All right, so if we go back over here and we take a look at our G major scale, then we can see right here that we have added our F sharp, okay? Now remember, in the subscriber content, if you pay for that, you will have access to the blank circle of fifths. You'll have access to all of these outlines and all of these worksheets, but if you don't, it's very easy to create a circle with 12 spaces on it, right? Okay, so we're gonna do the same drill for practicing our G major scale, and let me get that centered here on this page a little bit, go back to the piano, and let's give it a try here. Okay, we'll start with our right hand. We're gonna go 1, 2, 3, lift, 1, 2, 3. Don't forget your fourth finger is gonna be on that black note, the F sharp, and then our pinky, and then back down. Don't forget the chord. Perfect. Let's do that one more time, nice and smooth. Excellent. Let's try it with our left hand. And finally, let's put it hands together. There we go. So there are our major scales and our circle of fifths, and we will be continuing on this circle. As you can see, now you're starting to get the trajectory of this. As we reach that altitude, is just going to be moving 2 spaces around the circle every video. All right. Now the very last thing that I want to talk about today is let's play some music. We've talked so much about the nuts and bolts of it, but we haven't really gotten to put our hands on it. So one of the best pieces to start with, if you've never read music on the piano, is the great Mary Had a Little Lamb. Okay? Now we have our grand staff. We are in our 4/4 time, so you can see that there's going to be 4 beats in each measure. There's no syncopation here. It's all downbeats. And then, if we look right here, we're generally going, this little slice is where we'll look to see what scale we're in, okay? Now, sometimes you'll see some sharps or flats hanging out there, and those are going to correspond to what scale you're using. You can look at your circle of fifths to know, but in this case, there is nothing there, which means that we're going to be using the scale that has nothing there. That's the C major scale, okay? So, if we're going to read our right hand, we're going to want to set our hands up in a C major position with our thumb on C and our pinky on G. If you do that, you won't need to move your hand at all. You can notice down here that we have our middle C, which means if you count up, that would be our second finger. You'll be starting on your middle finger, okay? Now remember, you don't have to move your hand at all, but let's try now to play the right hand. It's going to look something like this, okay? So we're going to start on that E, and we're going to move down to C, and then we're going to walk back up. We're going to play 3 E's, 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to go down 1 note and play 3 D's, D, D, D. And then we're going to go back up, and we're going to play our middle finger and up to the pinky. Just like that. Notice I'm not moving my hand at all. We're going to continue doing that. We're going to walk down to the middle C, back up, and we're going to play 4 E's, 2, 3, 4. We're going to go down to our second finger. Just like that. Now here's a cool thing, okay? When it comes to the left hand, we want to know that one of the benefits of this whole process of learning music and the way that we are going to be learning it together is that we don't want to just look at black dots on the page and put our fingers on the correct black dot and be like, well, I'm playing this note because the black dot told me to do that. No, what we want to begin to see are scales and chords, and if you can recognize those shapes on the staff, then it will actually minimize the amount of reading you actually have to do. If you think about the title of this song, Mary Had a Little Lamb, you are not actually reading any of the letters in those words because you have a vocabulary, and therefore you recognize the word Mary, you recognize the word had, hopefully you recognize the word a, and then obviously you recognize little lamb. You're not reading Mary had a little. No, you're not reading those letters. You're just seeing the shapes and pulling them out of your vocabulary. Well, let's see how we can use that to make this left hand easier, okay? So I'm going to draw your attention first to the very last measure. We have a stack of notes there. Now, what does that look like? It kind of looks like what we were playing earlier. It looks like a chord, right? Anytime you see space, 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 or line, 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 a stack of 3 notes, that's going to correspond to a major chord that it kind of looks the same on the keyboard as well, where you have every other note, right? So if we have those 3 notes, we can actually backtrack and we can look that every other measure in this piece is actually just using one of those notes. For instance, these first 2 notes are just the bottom note, right? And if we know that that's a C major chord, then we don't have to count our lines and spaces and figure out that these are C's. We just know they're C's, right? We also don't have to count up and figure out what that note is because we know that the top note in a C major chord is a G, and therefore we know that our thumb is going to be on that G. And likewise, back down to the C, when we play them both together here, we don't have to count and think about that. We know that those are just the bottom note and the top note, we know that we come back to a G right here, and then finally we're going to play all three of those notes together here at the very end, okay? So let's, if we were to play that left hand, it would sound something like this. Not very exciting. And then together again. I'm not exactly counting correctly here. There we go. And if we're putting it together, okay? So when you practice this, I want you to practice hands separately and hands together, but I want you to think about those shapes that we've learned today, the scales and the chords, and I want you to see how Mary Had a Little Lamb is actually using those things to create this little simple song, and you can use that so that you don't have to spend so much time picking out all of the notes on the stuff. All right, excellent. So that's it. That's the end of our first week. I know it's a lot still, but it's tapering off. We're already reaching that cruising altitude, and it's only going to get easier from here as we continue to work on our major scales and our rhythmic warm-ups and our sight reading, okay? So thanks again. My name is Anthony from the Piano Dojo. Please subscribe, and you can get this sheet music, you can get the circle of fifths, and you can get all of the outlines that we talked about today in the subscriber content of my website, pianodojo.com. And happy practicing. I'll see you next week. Thanks.